Okay, being 6:15 on Monday, April the 17th, 2017, we'll call to order the Winooski City Council meeting and ask that everybody again please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance led by Acting Deputy Mayor Brian Sweeney.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, first up this evening is public comment. This is an opportunity for anyone to speak to council about something that is not on tonight's agenda. Take the opportunity to remind folks that number one, agendas are in the back if you're curious as to what is on the agenda, and also remind you that there's a sign-in sheet in the back as well that we would appreciate everybody taking a moment to sign for attendance as well. So this is an opportunity to address the council on something that's not on tonight's agenda. Yes, Ms. Tipson.
I'm a member of the board of the Food Shelf, and we are having an open house this Sunday from 2 to 4. I wanted to extend an invitation to you folks and all your folks who follow you on Channel 17 to let them know that open house Food Shelf, which is located in the Methodist Church, use the side entrance from 2 to 4. There will be, a few little refreshments as well.
Great. How are things going at the Food Shelf?
Going well. People have been very generous, and that's one of the other reasons we wanted to do it. A lot of people have been giving us things, periodically or forever, and chance for them to come in and see what it really looks like.
Great.
Yeah.
Will there be flowers?
Possibly.
All right.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. Anyone else for public comment for an item that's not on tonight's agenda? Okay, so seeing and hearing none, we'll move on to our consent agenda. Tonight we have 4 points underneath our consent agenda. First up, we have the City Council and Liquor Control minutes of April 3rd, 2017. We also have the payroll warrant 326 through 48, the accounts payable of 4/14, 2017, and subsequent to payout for February. We also have approval of the City Council newsletter schedule and approval of the small business loan program, both items that we discussed quite a bit in multiple sessions, so felt comfortable putting those tonight in the consent agenda so they don't just become empty discussion. Any questions or concerns regarding the consent agenda? I think everybody can vote on everything from an attendance perspective. So with that, I would entertain a motion for approval of the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Nicole, second by Eric. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And those opposed? Motion carries. Consent agenda is approved as presented. City update.
Great, thank you. So a couple of updates. The Winooski Wiffle Classic is taking place this Saturday, starting at 9 a.m. Because of low turnout, it is moving from Casamant Park up to Landry Park. But because there are under 200 people planning to attend, we could approve that administratively. So just wanted to let everyone know that that is moving, but it is happening this Saturday. I talked to you last meeting about the housing needs assessment recommendation staff was going to present to the Planning Commission. We have made that recommendation in writing, but the Planning Commission did not have a quorum, unfortunately, last week to hear it. So that's not before you tonight. Our hope is to bring that to you at your next meeting with the Planning Commission hearing it on the 27th. As we've talked about a couple of times, staff is working on the fee ordinance update. That will go through the commission process the end of this month and the beginning of May and be brought to you on May 15th. Just a note that will include the update to the fee chapter, but will not include relevant development impact fees. We have some work to do on our end before we're ready to recommend those, but we don't want to hold up the fee chapter because there's been a lot of discussion about it and a lot of work on into it. So similarly to the zoning ordinance update that will come to you periodically, we'll be bringing those to you periodically as well. Hopefully the public and you all saw the press release we issued last week about the environmental testing being done on the hotel site. So the contractor will be on site this week doing markings, doing the drilling next week, and then testing the following week. So that's just in summary to do environmental soil testing on site as part of the planning process. Also good information for the city to know comprehensively. second to last thing, we are doing a cleanup of Memorial Park this Thursday and Friday. There have been some encampments found down there that requires a pretty high level of third-party cleanup assistance. So they will be on site on Thursday and Friday to take out some of the biohazard waste and other things found there. And then Parks and Rec is going to step up work on improving the trail system through that park and hopefully make it a more active used site in the future. And then finally, staff is preparing to issue the annual request for proposals for the service agency grants. So we have in FY17 $20,000 to go out to the community. So we will be issuing those in the next couple of weeks. If people have ideas, we'd love to hear them. And just a reminder that those funding for that discontinues in 18. So this will be the last go around on these. That's what I had. Thank you.
Awesome. And just in case it's last minute too, well, we'll move on to council reports. I'll bring it up there. Okay, so we'll shift over now to council reports. Any questions for Jesse before we do? Okay, so seeing and hearing none. Want to start, E?
Sure, yeah, I guess the only council report I have is just on Friday, I had a sit-down tour of all things Winooski. Jesse coordinated me sitting down with all of our department directors, going out on site, and meeting with staff from different departments. So thank you so much for coordinating that, and thanks for all the department directors and staff who met with me. It was super amazing. We have such amazing people here, so it was really great to be able to have that day and that opportunity to get fully immersed.
That's awesome. And you got a picture of what the interview day was like for Jesse without the presentation at the very end for a room full of lots of questions.
It's very similar.
That's great.
I think we talked at Eric a little more.
It was great. It was a fantastic learning opportunity, and look forward to continuing to work with everybody.
It's great. Kudos for the investment of time and energy to do that. Brian?
Just a reminder, Green Up Day, May 6th, 9 o'clock to noon, I think, at the O'Brien Community Center.
Great. Yes, and just a couple quick things. We have an opening that will be broadcasting louder than this for CSWD, Chittenden Solid Waste District alternate for the district board. And I'm sure we'll be seeing their budgets pretty soon too. So usually they run those two processes concurrently, but nice opportunity for anybody out there who's interested in solid waste. And I gotta tell you, everybody reports back, it's much more interesting than it sounds. They actually do some really neat and innovative things. Just following what happens to a plastic bottle like this, unfortunately, after its use is fascinating. And just want to give kudos to Peter and Jesse too for their great participation in the school talent show. Awesome event and great community event. Lots going on in Montpelier that we're following and tracking on the legislative front. A lot going on regarding soils is a big conversation point right now that we're tracking closely, along with affordable housing bonding, and we're also continue to be engaged on tax issues and more building towards next year way. We will not get our garage tax issue fixed in this legislative session. That is assured, as there was a lot of effort and energy put into ensuring that I'll just say that the tax bill didn't get weighed down with anything that was even approaching controversial, which understandable as new leadership gets under their feet. So we'll be back next year. Anything else?
Public Safety Commission had a great meeting last week with the mayor and the city manager, which was a great opportunity to talk about what's been working well for the commission and what the needs are moving forward and the interests are. There are 2 alternate seats available, openings for the Public Safety Commission. So I know a number of folks have submitted applications, but if you have an interest in serving on the Public Safety Commission or learning more about the Public Safety Commission, meet the second Tuesday of every month from 6:30 to 8 o'clock.
Awesome. Anything else for council reports? So seeing and hearing none, we'll move on to agenda review. Just a reminder, we do have a public hearing at 6:30, but I'm betting we can get through at least one item before then. So with that, we'll move on to our regular agenda item. I don't think there's anything that needs to move given the way we space things out. So up first in regular items, we have item A, approval of proclamation After School Professionals Appreciation Week. Refreshed.
Yes. Hair is a little wild, but that's okay. Wanted to just take this opportunity. Next week, the 24th through 27th, is National After School Professionals Appreciation Week, put on by the National After School Association, and felt like a nice opportunity in public here to sort of tip our cap to the folks that are probably still working hard up at the school, taking care of our kiddos in the out-of-school time hours. So currently, Thrive staff, Jeremy, Kathy, Claudine, Michaela, Henry, and Afea are working hard every day after school during the school year, and then we'll bring on a whole crew during the summer as well. But had put a proclamation into the packet, and we're wanting to kind of just read that, and again, use this as an opportunity to call out the great work that they do for Winooski and for our kids.
That's awesome.
And Kirsty too. I should give her a nod. She doesn't just do all book work. She's up at, in the trenches, as they say, quite a bit too. So
I have seen in person Kirsty overseeing a massive snack session that was way more stressful than one could think possible if you haven't stepped into the middle of that very deftly and doing so in as organized fashion as you can with that many screaming hungry kids. So yeah, it's pretty amazing work that gets done. I mean, just going up and seeing a few times the enrichment that's taking place there during time that might not otherwise have that value added. So, and a big kudos to you guys for finding such a great way to partner with, you know, the school too, because that's, I mean, we like to say all the time that a child's education and the enrichment pieces can't end at the schoolhouse door. So you guys make that a reality.
yeah, and we've really, I think, on both sides of that equation, made a strong effort to have for the customer, if you will, for the kids and the families, a very seamless transition between school day and after school. And I think that has really shown for kids and families. They're hearing the same language, seeing the same sort of discipline and behavioral management techniques. You know, seeing in some cases the same people. Kathy's there all day and then hangs out for another couple hours every day, which is, I think, particularly admirable. So, yeah, it's been a great
Olive told me
partnership.
that after school is her favorite part of school.
Nice.
Likes to hang out with the big kids. It's a really nice opportunity for relationships to form between the K-5 cohort and a really nice, positive environment. So it's a great resource for the
Great to hear.
community.
Great.
Shall we read it?
Sure.
Awesome. Okay, so we have before us a proclamation to recognize After School Professionals Appreciation Week for April the 24th through 28th, 2017. Whereas the citizens of Winooski firmly believe that after-school professionals, those who work with children and youth in a wide variety of program settings to provide extended learning opportunities during out-of-school hours, have a positive effect on our children, families, community, and businesses. Whereas after-school professionals provide children with access to positive relationships and expanded opportunities which support them to reach their full potential. Whereas after-school professionals deserve appreciation for all that they do for children to enhance their education, promote physical and emotional health, provide a safe environment, and expose them to new experiences. Whereas the City of Winooski is committed to supporting the professionals who provide expanded learning opportunities that will help close the achievement gap and prepare young people to compete in the global economy. Now, therefore, the City of Winooski Council does hereby proclaim April 24th through 28th, 2017 as After School Professionals Appreciation Week in Winooski, and urges the citizens of Winooski to join us in this thanking our after-school professionals for their support or for their work and support of our kids. That will be dated today and effective April the 24th through 28th. Any comments, questions from council? Any comments, questions from the public? So seeing and hearing none, I entertain a motion for approval of the proclamation recognizing After School Professionals Appreciation Week for April the 24th through 28th.
So moved.
Motion by Nicole, second by Eric. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you for all of your work.
Thank
we
you,
really
guys.
appreciate it.
Thank
Thank you guys. Okay, and seamlessly we are at 6:30, so we will call to order. Let me make sure. Well, we just have that built in. Great. Want to make sure we didn't need to do the Pledge of Allegiance one more time. All right, so being 6:30, we'll call to order our public hearing. The public hearing is on the matter of consideration of CBDG funding for a project known as Strand Theater.
And I'll invite Heather Carrington from the city of Winooski and Larry Williams from Redstone up as well. So technically this is there are two items here in sequence. Public hearing on the application for the Community Development Block Grant to support this project. And then secondarily, back on your regular agenda will be your approval of our application for this funding. So we talked briefly at the last meeting about applying for this grant, $300,000 to support the public infrastructure associated with the Strand project. We provided you in your packet the a large segment of the application for this funding, as well as the development agreement the city has with Redstone. And Heather and Larry can answer any questions you may have.
I do have one answer to a specific question that was raised last time. There were questions about whether applying for this funding would impact our ability to get future funds, and I went directly to the state and asked, and no, that is not a consideration in future funds.
Great.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome.
Thank you.
How are we doing?
Doing well, I think.
Okay, any other sort of overarching comments before we open up for conversation?
Just for the public, I'd just like to say what the infrastructure is that's associated with this grant. It involves funds for realignment of Main Street, narrowing West Allen Street, new granite curbing, public sidewalks, a new three-way crosswalk, and other pedestrian improvements, bollards, lighting, landscaping, plaza and park improvements, and other public infrastructure. And this is potentially a transformative project for the city, so this public infrastructure I think provides much needed support for a project that anchors the city both financially by providing a 1,500 seat performance venue, which will then bring in support for the existing businesses. It's a perfect synthesis of two different business types that will support each other. And it also anchors our new Gateway District up Main Street. So it's also a physical anchor that will set the stage and the tone for the way that the streetscape improvements will happen along the proposed developments up that street. So it anchors us in two different ways.
Great. Yeah, and so just, some additional background context if you're hearing this for the first time. This is in reference to what a lot of people will call the Key Bank lot, formerly Key Bank lot, that includes what was two segmented pieces of property, including the park up front and the sitting park, as well as the Key Bank property where there's currently parking in the building that's not in action right now. So the city signed in, was it November, or negotiated a development agreement in November or December of 2 years ago for that to include a significant amount of public infrastructure work around that corner. As with our TIF district, a common thread investment for public and private partnerships is dollars that can be invested on the municipal side, or in this case, state or federal funds, can oftentimes really be the catalyst for that direct personal investment or private investment into a community. So that's really what's being proposed here, is to apply for funds that would make that relationship what it is. So, and it would include the infamous three-way crosswalk, which I think everybody's really been interested in, instead of doing the zig and the zag when it comes to that little crossing over there, walking between the Allen Street over to the block building area. So Anything to add, Larry, from your perspective?
I guess the only thing I would add is this really comes at a critical time for this project. Since we negotiated that development agreement 2 years ago, we've struggled to try to make economic sense of the project. And since that time, construction costs have continued to increase, interest rates have continued to increase. And probably most significantly is we were working with Vermont Energy Investment Corporation on some incentive funding for energy related work. And a few months ago got word that that program had essentially been terminated with things that are going on in Washington. So that was a real blow. So the idea to be able to redirect and look at the CDBG program to fund some of these on-street improvements that have to be funded one way or another. Really, the timing was incredibly fortunate. So we're hoping for all those reasons you can support us in this.
Good. Great. And I think Heather did a good job of explaining where the value perspective's been from the city in terms of pursuing assistance for the project too. So now I would open it up for council review and discussion. One thing mentioned too is we had asked in the previous meeting for a brief description of financial status and overview, and we received that. That's not something, if there's questions about that is prudent to quiz on in an open session. So if there's specific finance questions that pop up that did not answer, we just ask that we be mindful of the privacy of the folks who are involved in it and say there are items that could be executive session worthy if you've got specific questions that drill into that. But with that, open it up for comments, questions, concerns for Jesse, Heather, and Larry.
Something popped up for me, which is just the infamous three-way crossing. Just thinking about that. Is there any opportunity, does this allow us any opportunity to ask for any sort of rework of that? I was just looking at the plans and realizing that there's no flashing signal proposed in that crossing, and with a potential 1,500 seat venue that's pushing people to the garage, which is exactly how we want it to work, but then think about like the walking flow, it would push a lot of people to that crossing. Mm-hmm. And I've just seen the success of the flashing crossings that we have now, and we're starting to implement those in other areas of the city as well. Is there any sort of opportunity here for us to get a flashing crossing?
Yeah.
I mean, that's basically what it comes down to for me. Like, just thinking about it, and I don't know if I'd really just thought about that the first time when we saw it, when this stuff first came to us. I don't know if we really had the crossings really worked out at that point and what was really going on. But when I looked back over those agreements, that was the only thing for me that kind of like popped up as maybe this is an opportunity for us to look at that.
We can certainly explore that from a public safety and public works perspective. We'll approve all those final public way designs, so we can add that into our plans.
Yeah, my thought was more, is there a way to work that in so that that's part of what the developer is implementing for infrastructure
those public infrastructure improvements.
Yeah. But
so all those public infrastructure improvements will be part of the developer's work project. They will just be supported both if approved and acquired, these grant funds as well as the sales tax reallocation funds.
So I think what the statement there is, there's enough room for that to be a potential solution worked into that outcome. That's possible if it were the recommended, it were the recommended intersection action to be taken. I mean, I think it's a great question, and it's one where we didn't touch that intersection in large part because there was an understanding that this project was going to be happening. It's also what I would call the most polite intersection in Chittenden County, whereby in the morning cars alternate, which it would be interesting to know if lack of visibility of that queue on Allen Street would impact that, because that's how a lot of our residents exit into the driving world as they leave their homes. But so I guess maybe your point is there's room, we would interpret as saying there is room in that agreement for that to be part of the execution without it having to be specifically spelled out?
I believe so.
Yeah, and I guess the only thing I would say is, I wasn't party to those specific discussions in terms of what those intersections look like. And, I think a lot of it might fall back to the city to say if that really does make sense or not. I think it's really your call, and, one of the concerns I would see is if you give too much preference to pedestrians with the amount of people coming out of that venue, people might be waiting a long time to leave the light. So I'm not sure. I mean, I think the project can probably figure out how to make that work financially. I'm not sure at the end of the day whether it's the right solution. I mean, we want to make it as easy and safe for folks who are coming to the shows to travel. I think really the city has to, or the city staff has to sort of weigh in on what makes the most sense.
Right.
Everything considered.
Yep. So to the extent that it would be appropriate for public safety, it is certainly something that we could approve as part of the public infrastructure plan, and there would be funding in this project budget to make that happen.
Perfectly satisfied with it. Good to have that idea noted.
Mm-hmm.
I just had a question in regards to the methodology for, I think it's page 3 in the public hearing packet, in regards to the number of beneficiaries from the project and what methodology went into identifying them as beneficiaries.
Yeah, actually, it's an area-wide benefit that we're qualifying under, so it's by percentage of our population that meets certain income eligibility. So that is our entire citywide population, and as they fall in census numbers within those specific target zones, like it's 30% of, it's low to moderate income.
So this was more reflective of the economic impact it has on the region rather than a direct sort of impact, because I did see later in the packet as well the discussion around 200 jobs created by the project with an additional 160 permanent.
Yeah, we actually qualified just based on our population.
Okay.
So that was something that I discussed with the state early on. The requirement is 51% of the population being low to moderate income. We actually qualify with 59% low to moderate income.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions, concerns from council?
When's the next opportunity to apply for grants in terms of, so you said it won't impact future applications?
Right, they're done quarterly. This is the last round for the 2016 dollars, which we already have in hand in the state. There is some question about CDBG funds in the future. But generally, it happens on a cycle quarterly. So,
thank you.
So there's a proposal out there right now to totally revamp the way that this is CDBG and home funding, the two primary sources of community investment that come to the state right now.
So the criteria that we're responding to, are those state-developed criteria implementing a federal program, or how much control does the federal government have over what types of projects get funded with these dollars?
There are 2 levels to that. So the criteria, the economic development and the housing criteria are at the state level, but it all falls under HUD. So there's criteria, the low to moderate income is a criteria from the federal level.
Okay.
And I think can you help us understand any potential implications for the longevity of the work? I like to call them, we have HUD trees downtown, which are literally trees that were paid for by HUD money that to move would require a crazy amount of paperwork and administration, but in terms of, there are long-term implications in terms of what's left behind.
There are long-term reporting requirements. The way that we've chosen to go about this was in part driven by that. If we're specifically applying under public facilities, which doesn't have as onerous a set of reporting requirements as the economic development would in terms of jobs creation, in terms of limiting the tenants that could potentially come into this project. But yes, there will be some time baked in for me to do reporting on this, and that will be over a period of years. So, but there's also funding baked in for that. So.
And does this put us in single audit?
This by itself, no. Possibly in concert with other grants that we've received. It'll depend on the aggregate total that we end up with.
Okay. Which we frankly come close to paying for now anyway, so it wouldn't have a truly substantial, we get really close to single audit.
And it doesn't necessarily depend on the amount of awards that you have, it's how much you spend in a year. So we have some federal awards that span a number of years. The pedestrian TA grant that was just received is a period of 4 years to spend the funding, and that one was almost $200,000.
Okay. So once you spend a certain number of federal dollars, it puts in a different auditing category, which can be some extra work, but we, again, because we're GASB compliant, we're pretty much there anyway. Other questions, concerns from council? I'm going to open it up and see if there are questions, concerns, comments from the public for the council. Okay.
We're talking specifically about this?
Yes, CBDG funding, yeah. This project, yeah. Do you have anything for this?
I feel like I missed the first 5 minutes, so I don't really want you guys to have to sit here and recap it for me, but.
There's a project going on, the city's trying to decide the Strand Theater for the next door. And the decision is whether to apply for funds that would help with the infrastructure improvements that will include narrowing Allen Street, the rebuild of the sidewalk and curvature around there, and really a realignment of the intersection, the way the crosswalks work there. So there's some of those public improvements that we're proposing to potentially fund with this application.
There'll be like additional public sidewalk space as well that'll like expand out and be a little bit more usable seeming for everybody too. As part of it.
Was there, in the notice that was sent out, there was something about landscaping? Is there money for trees? Stuff like that?
That's a great question. So when we did the negotiation of the development agreement, it included actually very specific trees that had very specific yields of leaves and had very specific shade intentions. So yes, there was good thought put into that and about the types of trees that would be placed there. And again, even what the maintenance on them would require from a municipal perspective. That's kind of going back. I don't think we have renderings in any recent packages, but generally I'm assuming things
I don't
look,
think that's changed.
yeah, relatively the same. Yeah, great question. So the answer is yes, there are trees in the project.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is that park that's currently there, is that?
It is part of the, you're right, that's part of the land transaction, so it's not, the park would not stay as it is.
And that's not city land.
Yeah,
That's privately owned land. In the past, KeyBank had been willing to lease for a modest fee to the city, and then we in turn turned use of it over to Seasons Greetings to do seasonal activities there.
which they've moved kind of into the Rotary Park.
That's where we saw the pumpkins move this year.
Pumpkins are great.
Good. Any other questions, concerns from the public? Okay. I just want to say, I mean, this is, I think Heather summed up a lot of the real benefits. There's always trepidation on this end for any kind of commitment to city resources and our responsibility to ask questions, but don't want those questions and that thoughtful approach to dampen the excitement around the project in general, and the belief that this can be something that's really important to the city. And we've appreciated the working with you, Larry, and everybody, and thanks on behalf of staff for all the background work here too, to this point. Yes?
And just for the benefit of the minutes, if you could officially close the public hearing so we can document that in the application.
Absolutely. And do we vote? We don't need to vote to close the public hearing. I think I can just close it. Great. Any last comments before we close the public hearing? There will be an action item on tonight's agenda.
I think just the prospect of having an economic anchor for that downtown is really exciting.
Yeah. Great, and so with that, we will close the public hearing. I'm gonna recommend, in the interest of time, that we actually make an adjustment on the agenda and take up the voting item right now. So we will move item F to item B. Okay, and with that, we'll open item F, which is approval of CBDG grant application. We just closed the public hearing on this, so we will make everybody do the song and dance again. But I'll ask if there's any questions or concerns from council.
I do have just one question.
Yes.
So if the grant is approved, what happens if other financing situations don't work out? So, I mean, what happens if the project doesn't, for some reason, move forward? What happens to those grant funds? I would assume that you have to return them? Okay.
We'd have to requisition them in order to get them first.
Yeah, we just
So
wouldn't
the
draw
project
them.
would
needs,
draw
you can't,
down.
you don't get the funds until the project is green-lighted on all fronts. Thank you.
Good question. Other questions, concerns? Any questions or concerns from the public? So seeing and hearing none, I entertain a motion for approval of the CBDG, or Community Development Block Grant application submittal for the City of Winooski for the Strand project.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Brian, second by Nicole. Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, motion carries.
Thank
Best
you
of
very
luck.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we will now get back on track, going back to what is now item C or item B on our list. So we have approval of the library grants.
I will be quick here. So this is a grant through the Paul Post Foundation for $350 to support a reading project at the farmers market this summer. So this is a grant that has been applied for and awarded, but in order to accept the award, we are here seeking your permission. So Elsie, I think, did a nice job of summing this up. It's a really nice kind of step out beyond our walls, which I think Amanda and Elsie have really been working hard to do. And I will be honest that I didn't catch the pun my first read through, and it took me a little. I was like, "What time? What?" So story time, THYME.
Yeah.
Ba-dum-ching. So, yeah. So again, great project, great program, and a good partnership with the farmers market that we're pretty excited about. So, happy to answer any questions or specifics.
Any questions or concerns from the council? Any questions or concerns from the public? Go to the library grant. Seeing and hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve acceptance of the Paul Post Fund Library Grant in the amount of $350.
Second.
Motion by Eric, second by Brian. Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Hi.
And those opposed, motion carries. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thanks for your
Look forward
work.
to that.
We're working on redoing that policy.
Yeah.
Item C, approval, asset management planning grant.
So for the next, as Peter comes up for the next two grant proposal requests, Peter will come up and talk to you about them in detail. Both are related to the development and build out of our asset management system. As we put together the water and wastewater and stormwater budgets, it's even more apparent how much we need an asset management system to demonstrate and to make decisions strategically about how to replace our aging infrastructure. So these two grants are grants that the staff of Public Works has identified as resources to help us in our full build out of that system.
Good evening.
Just pleased to be up here sharing the stage with you rock stars. That was pretty cool. I got to play 2 songs, and I didn't even practice once. The first one, and they're both, this one's Clean Water Asset Management Grants from the state. This is
That's the second one,
which one's first?
just the asset management.
Asset Management Planning Grant. We'll go to the next one. This is for an amount of $20,000, and it's specifically to, for the asset management program, it's specifically to do the attributes and the assets within the structure and the wastewater plant as a separate unit so that we do them all at one time, and bring them into the system all at once. And that's mostly because of the multitude of pumps and pipes and every other piece of equipment. I mean, that place is just equipment laden. You all saw it last week. So that's, there's no match on our part, it's just an advising contract. Or is that the first?
No,
See, Johnson, I got these backwards, don't I?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, I do. This one is to add, this is to augment our implementation of the program and continued funding of the consultant.
This is phase 2.
This is phase 2. This
Okay.
is additional funding in phase 2.
And for those who are watching at home, what was phase 1?
Phase 1. Phase 1 was me pulling out my hair. That's why there's none left. Phase 1 was the development of, it was the needs assessment, the attributes, the selection of the program, and pretty much that's it. And then selection of the vendor based on the program that we selected, and then begin phase 2, which is implementation.
Great. And that's John Choate came and gave a presentation about
That's
the
correct.
different. Okay.
Yeah, I was out of town. He gave a presentation that night, I believe.
Yep. Talked about what.
And he
what
had
they
some,
achieved.
he had some sample screens and stuff like that. So probably in about 6 weeks, we'll be able to have some live screens that we can all look at.
Great.
And that's what, truthfully, that's what I'm waiting for. I'm getting really impatient about it.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think without going ad nauseum and doing here's a click by click of how to do it, it was pretty interesting to see how Firehouse functioned. That was a useful presentation and a nice level of detail that provided a demonstration to people of how it actually worked. That was actually, I thought, useful without going through, onerous detail of everything, so the 15-minute version, but that was actually kind of nice. So seeing some screenshots would be interesting.
Yeah, and, the other part of that is unfortunately our stuff has to, it's so much broader, it has to be customized entirely, and
Yeah.
that takes a little more time.
Other questions, comments regarding the grant proposal? Looks like, and we can do in kind for the 5,000.
And we've got a couple of people that are putting in a lot of hours doing inventories and assessments.
Great.
I'd take the risk and say we probably more than met our in-kind already, but we'll keep going.
Yeah. Well, we're excited to see the work towards getting the assets mapped and valued and get a good process for asset management in place. And it's been a long haul, so thanks for all the work. Other questions, concerns from council? Questions or concerns from the public regarding the $20,000 asset management grant? Great, so seeing and hearing none, I'd entertain a motion for, let me get the words correct here, approval of the asset management planning grant.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Nicole, second by Brian. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed? Motion carries. All right, what was formerly item D, Clean Water Asset Management Grant.
No, by the process of elimination, I'm in the right place. This one is strictly for assistance in the wastewater plant, cataloging and inventorying all of the component parts, putting them into the system and having the wastewater treatment, because the wastewater treatment plant is treated as a single entity in the program, while the collection system is separated from that, just like the water system is separated and the stormwater pipes are separated. So we'd like to pursue this, and as I said, it doesn't require anything on our part other than being available to help
advise as the technical assistance is done. So they're gonna supply the people to do this. And so that gets us over quite a hurdle in terms of our being able to bring the system online quicker. Because if we had to do it, there's a couple months worth of work there for one person to try to do.
Great. So, questions, concerns?
I might have missed this. So this is gonna be integrated, this is basically inputting information into the asset management software program.
Correct, but
That's
strictly related to the wastewater plant.
right. But it's not gonna be a different system, that's all
Same system.
integrated. Great, that sounds great.
It's like half of a year of staff time,
Yeah.
you know, $31,000. Yeah.
Having just been there Friday, there are so many technical components that go into the functioning of that. So it'd be really great to have some assistance mapping all those assets out.
Great. Other questions, comments from council? Any questions or comments from the public? Great. So seeing and hearing none, I'd ask for a motion regarding the approval for the Clean Water Asset Management Grant.
Second.
Motion by Eric, second by Brian. Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Hi.
And those opposed, motion carries. Thanks. Thank you very much, Peter.
John will be
Fourth and
happy.
conquer.
Yeah.
He's already smiling, he doesn't even know yet.
All right, we have item E. I won't say tonight's main event because there's another budget presentation. I don't want to make anybody feel. But we have the rental registry budget presentation.
Yeah, so we actually gave you this presentation at the last meeting. So this is on for approval. We weren't intending to go back through the whole presentation unless there was interest.
I forget the whole thing, so.
I just love that first slide so much.
Okay, yeah, so with that, I guess we'll open up and say, were there any questions that people had for John? I think we talked through the items, what was changing. Any questions, concerns? Any questions or concerns from the public? Again, this was a presentation that took place last time. We're in the period of time where we approve our non-general fund budget. So these are enterprise, self-sustaining funds that come forward. We do a presentation one meeting and then approval the next. This is the rental registry that's up today, and a little later you'll hear us do the community services presentation, which then will come back next time around for approval. Okay, so seeing no questions or concerns, I would entertain a motion for approval of the rental registry budget as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Brian, second by Nicole. Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Hi.
And those opposed, motion carries. Well done.
Thank you.
Wait, what's a rental registry?
That was a really tough one for you, John.
For the record, that first slide was actually John Audie's suggestion at our leadership team meeting.
Ooh.
Wow.
Kudos to him.
One of the cold over.
What do they say about even a blind squirrel?
Oh, wow. I didn't even hear that.
Be careful, his family might be watching that one.
That's right.
All right, so we completed item F earlier, the approval of CBDG funding, so we'll move on to item G, discussion of the budget for the Community Services Department.
So Ray Coffey, the director of the Community Services Department, will come up and do this set of presentations, and it would give us just a minute to get our technology set up. In the interest of not repeating the rental registry one, the community services one is very long.
Is what?
It's very long.
We're trying. We'll
Just
try to
run
keep it
through
quick.
So they're not being developers.
Yeah, and we had a really good, robust discussion at the commission level on all these budgets. So with the exception of the O'Brien Center, which we'll talk about at the very end, these went through with, went through with approval there. Hal Colston's here from the commission, so if there are questions there, I may call on him to kind of refresh on that conversation. I think before we dive into these, there are two sort of large caveats that I want to kind of put for all of these budgets. One is that a lot of the fiscal year 17 current year stuff was happening in interim land. So a lot of weirdness across our department this year, given my move to the city manager role and Kirsty's to the community services director. So I think generally these budgets are pretty consistent and trending with where they've been and pretty accurate. But I think too, if there are any anomalies or kind of oddballs there, in some cases chalking those up to just the challenge of being two interim directors with a lot of people underneath carrying a lot of extra weight. So the other thing that you'll see kind of referenced here quite a bit looking forward is just trepidation about the federal budget. And I think I'll spare any song and dance, but I think it's fair to say the human service landscape for financing is questionable moving into the future. And so especially areas where there's budgetary pieces, we're moving forward with high hopes, but also having plan B, C, and D ready to go. So without further ado, jump in if that's all right. So Recreation and Parks is up first. So this is actually in our budgetary scheme titled Community Services, but this is our rec department budget. So again, ties back to the vision statement. By and large, all of our stuff has a really strong tie in that fourth sphere, that safe, healthy, connected people. But I think too, wanted to tie back where we could realistically within the economic vitality, transportation, and housing pieces. In a lot of those cases, they're not necessarily specifically tied to this piece of the budget, but to the services that this budget is a part of. So felt like that was important to point out there. And just as a factoid, 220 acres of parks. I know I've shared that before in Winooski, but that's kind of an eyebrow raiser for a lot of people.
Bonus question, what percentage of the total land mass is that?
Angela.
It's like 25%, right? If you do the math, 20?
Is it? I don't know, that seems high.
I think if you do
18, I think it might be 18%.
I think if you do 1 square mile and do that acreage, I think it's like 20%. But anyway, sorry. Great. So I don't even know the answer.
Point being,
bonus
You
question.
asked the bonus question.
I thought I heard that from you, Ray. Come on.
So in terms of accomplishments here last year, moving to the web-based registration program, winooskirec.com, which is based on a MyRec platform, has been a big move for us. It's taken a lot of legwork behind the scenes by staff, but it's, I think, really starting to be a positive move and making registration and payment a lot more convenient for families. Alicia Finley, our new rec director, is now all of not quite 6 months with the organization, so very new. We did a lot of work last summer, as you well know, providing alternative activities because of the closure of the pool. So that was a good thing for us to do, but a lot of new projects, new work, new things happening for us last year. Summer teen employment, yet again last year, another successful program there. We had 12 kids come through. And then of course our Halloween event, which has grown really quickly into a staple here in the community. So over 500 people last year attended that. And that's a program that's funded out of this budget. In terms of significant changes, so coming up, we are anticipating a Winooski Wednesday series. So the first one will actually be in current year, but that'll be 4 Wednesdays, June through September. We're doing concerts in the park, partnership with WCP and the Monkey House. So we hopefully will start advertising those next week. We just booked the 4th band today. So we've got a whole slate. Paul's going to do some flyer design and we'll be good to go. And looking also to do some expanded summer programming. So Alicia has done a really nice job in concert with Kirsty and her team at looking at the weeks where there isn't care. So the school closes first week in August for maintenance, basically for that entire month. So there's a gap for families between when Thrive and school programs end and the school year begins again. So we've got 3 weeks planned in August this year, 3-week-long camps. They won't be the same size as Thrive. Typically Thrive's carrying between 60 and 90 kids depending on the week. These are going to be more 20 to 25 kids, but I think a really nice effort on the team's part to kind of fill the niche that's there for at least some of the families that are needing care. So those will be more activity driven, but definitely an exciting change and addition for us next year. I'm going to ask you to toggle over to this Excel. And this is a lame technology strategy here, but instead of blowing up my entire PowerPoint, we're going to toggle over to the Excel spreadsheet. So So as you guys have this in front of you, so before this kind of comes up for the public's view here, are there questions or any specific details you've got about the budget as proposed for this, for community services / recreation?
Please.
So in terms of charges for services,
Yep.
so that's, we're projected to come in this year
Yep.
pretty significantly under budget.
Yep.
So could you provide a little bit of context for that and
Yep.
why you think we will be
Why
able
we're
to
able to get
be
there.
in better position next year?
Yep. So pretty good chunk last year, we didn't have a rec director in place, so there was a void there where we weren't running fee-based programs. Again, I just mentioned 3 week-long camps that we're going to be running that'll be fee-for-service based programs. So that is factored in here as well. And then looking into the future, I think with Alicia here and some of the work and planning we've got going, we're anticipating more fee-based services into the future. So I think, again, I'm chalking that low number up somewhat to the interim space that we were in and the gap between rec directors. I think those were both really notable challenges for us in terms of running new programs. But again, I think with already 3 programs, week-long, full fee in the works, pretty confident that we can get to that number this year. So, and I know there's other programming Alicia's got planned for young adults, so kind of weekly outings, kind of trying to take advantage of our young population here, the under 40. Jesse and I are very excited about that getting off the ground this year, so that we can take advantage. But again, I think some good things in the pipeline there to get us to that point. But that's a good question. Any other questions on this one?
Why don't the salaries live on it? Are they just on the?
So all in the general fund.
They're all in the
Yep.
general.
So we don't really have at this point, with the exception of Thrive, staff that are paid for out of these special revenue budgets.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yep. No, good question.
You had said that there was thought that was put into backup planning based on federal funding availability.
Yep.
Do you mind just walking, maybe, not necessarily drill down in the weeds specifics, but what are some of our fallbacks?
So just broadly, or a lot of it is scaling up or down programming accordingly. I think there aren't a lot of examples in here where federal funding is tied in. Thrive is certainly one, and that I think that would be a big question mark for us. We do run a fee-based program, so at the end of the day, we have at this point right about half of our clients who are fee-paying attendees. So I think we'd be able to maintain a program of some variety for those families that are able to pay. We also have some reserves, as we may get to as well, within community services that would allow us to kind of weather some storms. But a lot of it is just being ready to scale programming up or down accordingly. I can't say there's another grant pool that we'd go for, or we'd kind of be looking to dramatically ramp up fees. I think one of the challenges with fee-based programming in Winooski is there's been historically not a lot of it, and I think we're really trying to change culture to say, one, it's okay to run a program that people have to pay to be at. That's normal. That's what rec programs do. At the same time, we need to be really sensitive that we have a very socioeconomically diverse community, and we don't want to create boundaries or barriers for people to participate. So there's a lot of weighing of how much can we charge realistically while still serving as many people as possible. And I think that's culturally been a big change. Again, there's, I think, a mentality for a long time that everything needed to be free. And believe me, in an ideal world, that's where we would be, but we're not. So I think that's the other piece too, is trying to ratchet up that fee-based and fee-for-service model so that we cannot be as grant dependent moving into the future. So I don't have a lot of great specifics, unfortunately. It's just kind of being prepared to scale up or down and having those conversations sort of proactively.
Are there specific areas of vulnerability when you look at what federal money we get?
Yeah, I think Thrive will be a big one that we'll get to. Within REC, we do have some funding here from the 21st Century Learning Centers grant that we have in partnership with the school, about $3,000 here that is slated to go towards youth sports kind of materials, equipment, supplies. So again, we would likely scale back that program, and maybe we wouldn't provide t-shirts, or we would have to borrow equipment from another community, or there are different ways we could try to get services provided. But yeah, Thrive is really the big one, where we have a lot of families who are coming to us on the subsidy system. And again, that one will be in more detail when we get down the road. So, and then the meals program too is another one that I think, again, we're looking at reimbursements from the government to provide those meals. So it's feasible that that program could look dramatically different if that reimbursement weren't available. So
We're not showing the transfer from fund balance,
I'm sure what you mean.
the fund balance contribution.
Yeah, wasn't there 15 grand for parks?
that's in capital.
That's the capital.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Good question. Man, you got me excited for a minute there.
Yeah. Well, by the way, while you were gone.
$100,000 appropriation.
All right.
Just so we remind people of what the expenditure was there. I'm sorry, 13,000 comes to
I think it was 15.
For parks, 15.
15. Okay. Yep.
For parks equipment.
Right.
Right.
Yep. So that's infrastructure, capital related expenses.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Just refreshing your mind. So any other questions on that one? Should mention too the lease here, just to call it out. I think you all know that that's there, but we are actually paying ourselves a lease for the space that we inhabit at the O'Brien Center. So that's, what is it, $6,350 projected for next year's budget, and that's related to the O'Brien Center budget, which we will no doubt talk about in a little bit in more detail. But any other questions on that one?
Am I recalling incorrectly that I thought we did like $6,000 too for rec funding. Am I totally making that up?
You did $6,000 that you retained in the general fund as an
fund.
ad.
Okay, that's right.
Yep.
It was in place of
16.
restoring the pool, you only
Yep.
restored a small
Yep.
portion of funding.
But that's in the general fund.
Yeah.
It's all going to the same programming.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
Nope.
I'm just making sure because
Yeah, these are the monies separate and apart from anything funded by tax dollars.
Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
I'm just blending. Getting old.
Funding funds.
Thank you.
Can't spell fun without fun.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions on Parks Rec?
And from an approval perspective, and I'll look at you too, is it better to approve these all together, one at a time? What's the easiest tack to take here?
These are
Wait for
discussion.
approval next time?
Yeah, oh, yes, sorry, next time. Getting ahead of myself. Never mind.
Presumptuous over there.
I know.
We need
These
to
are- these
think
are-
about this for a while.
Yeah, sorry. All right. So next up,
Yeah, I guess maybe just a quick pause to see, Ray, before we jump into senior, if there's any questions or concerns on the park and recreation. We're gonna take each piece of the community services budget. Okay.
onward. So next up, and these are just in order of the codes, so there's no particular priority here other than numerical. So senior center budget is up next. So again, these are funds outside of the general fund that go towards our senior programs. This is a budget and a program that's performed really well, and in large part, and thanks to the staff and volunteers that participate down at the center. You know, Barb kind of jokingly calls this the most exciting place in Winooski, and for good reason, if you've been down there recently. So lots of give backs here in terms of the vision statement. Again, I think exciting to see the transportation and housing elements too, because I do really think that we are able to support folks aging in place because of some of the services that we're providing. And so while that is not a direct provision of housing per se, I think it certainly helps to make more housing options available to more seniors. And a strong partnership, increasingly strong partnership with the Housing Authority as well, has been a really nice improvement over the last year or so. So moving into the accomplishments. So we've got an updated membership process where we're trying to do a better job of keeping tabs on who's coming and going. That has obvious benefits when it comes to showing the use and the value and just kind of that data piece, but also from an emergency contact perspective, this was a concern. You know, we have a lot of seniors coming in and out every day and want to make sure that if we need to, we have a way to reach a family member or a support. So that's been a nice improvement there. Lots of improvements to the space and more coming. Hopefully this year we're going to get some paint on the building on the outside. I know that's been a long time coming. And also some work on some of the windows there that are slated to be done through capital. So exciting to have that going on. We did just add 2 weeks ago a new senior programs assistant, Patricia Tree Spalding, and she goes by Tree, who's been a great add, brings a lot of energy and just a really mellow and placid sort of personality to the space, which is really, really nice. As you well know, lots of volunteers and many hours that keep that space afloat. Don't have current year data as yet, but 2 years ago served 9,900 Meals on Wheels, and that number is not anticipated to go down significantly this year. And the core programs, I think, continue to really thrive. We're excited to be able to start looking forward now with 2 staff members at the possibility of adding some things to the calendar and to the slate. But I think Barb and the team there have done a great job of sort of keeping things rolling and keeping those core programs healthy. So significant changes coming up, or as part of this budget. I think it's worth noting, you'll see in the specialty supplies line that we're trending towards a high projection for the year end. There was a fee from fiscal year 16 that didn't get paid until 17 for some of our community meals. And it was $2,100, I believe.
Yeah, and it's in the Office of General Supplies.
Oh, Office of General Supplies, thank you.
Yeah, and it was not paid until after the period where I was able to book it back to the prior year. We weren't invoiced until after September 3rd.
Right. So in essence, there's $2,100 of expense that really belongs to a different fiscal year. So I think worth noting that there. But on a positive note, when more people come in and use these programs, these numbers climb. And generally they are, you know, net zero or slightly net positive for us. So that's a good thing. These numbers are a bit of a guess, but for me, as long as that bottom line looks healthy, this is a budget that feels to be in good shape. So I don't know if there's any specific questions as we start to look at the numbers on this one.
Any questions regarding the proposed senior center budget? Any questions, concerns from the public?
Okay.
Ahead we go.
Great.
I guess I will just say quickly, seeing that number of 80 volunteers, that it just astounds me. That's amazing. That's what community is.
And I think that's honestly a fairly conservative estimate. Those are the people that we're tracking. There's a lot of informal good that goes on down there on any given day. So yeah, definitely exciting.
Is June or July is the appreciation typically?
It'll be June. We're still figuring out a date. Yep, but it'll be June at some point. We'll do our big appreciation dinner.
We've got some cool slides on the impact of that. I mean, not that it's not all monetary, because it's not, but it's insane what a benefit it is. Yeah.
Yep. All right. Oh boy. So meals program, and that's you can go to the next. All right. So this is a budget that I have said, I think now for 5 years in a row, that of the budgets that we run a deficit on, this one I feel really good about. And I know that's strange to say running a negative number, but this is the budget through which we do all of our free Meals for Youth. And so again, for me, if at the end of the year we're spending $500, $600 to serve, in some cases, 1,000 meals for free to kids, that's money I spend every time. So bring you a budget here knowingly with a deficit, but again, it's one that I feel like as we look at these budgets in totality is well worth kind of continuing to run that way. So we do our meals through the Abbey group at this point, which is based up at the school. We've shifted this year to doing more bag lunch meals. So we're getting away from the hot meal program, which had been really challenging to get people to. So we're at this point, as of last summer, serving between 50 and 80 meals a day through the public library. Those are bag lunches. Kids can come in 18 and under and grab those at any point. And that's been an amazing shift for us, where we were kind of pulling teeth to get 10, 15 kids to a hot meal that was very structured and very labor intensive. So this has been a really nice shift. I've got to give Colleen Sullivan, our Vista, a huge amount of kudos for doing the legwork to make that shift happen, and to the library for being willing to stick a fridge behind their circ desk and hand out bag lunches. It's been a really nice shift. So also excited that we had a really strong partnership pilot last summer with the WCP and NOFA Vermont at the farmers market, and we are actually in the process of looking for funding in partnership with those guys again to run that program again this summer. And that again, we were handing out, in some cases, 60 free meals on a Sunday morning to any kid that walked up. And that's just an awesome program to be able to do. So, and then I think as we continue to look forward, I was glad to have Sally here. I'm certainly hoping to make it over on Sunday, but the food shelf is an area where we continue to want to have a strong partnership. There isn't a formal funding element in this budget, but in the spirit of meals and food, I think it's important to mention them here as a really key ally. So I'll put my verbiage to rest and ask if there's any specific questions on the financials of this budget.
So just from a summary perspective, we're pulling the deficit from reserves?
So this budget is still carrying, I believe, a slight surplus.
At the end of FY16, it had just under $2,000.
So I guess too, the challenge will just be in the next couple of years. I mean,
Yep. I'll be interested to see with a full year of just the bag lunches under our belt, kind of what our costs ends up looking like. I mean, our overhead is negligible for that. So I am curious to see, and I think the reimbursement levels are narrowing, so that's good. But unfortunately, there's a discrepancy at this point between the cost of a meal and what the reimbursement will cover.
Yeah.
So the charges for services at $4,000, that's the reimbursement?
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
And what's the other revenue?
One is summer meals, one is school year meals.
We have a grant program for some.
And we track those separately because they're slightly different funding mechanisms.
Yeah, there's a grant one for the summer.
So, and we have a few sites in town that are summer meal sites, like
Yep, the school also runs a summer meal site. So the city had run that for many years, and we finally said, why are we running a meal site in your space, going through all the shenanigans of getting keys and dealing with janitors when they have the ability to run that program? So they took that over 3 years ago, and it's been a huge success. Totally seamless from a customer perspective and way less headache and paperwork. The Abbey Group is able to just continue producing meals through the summer instead of us bringing in a third-party vendor, and it's just been a lot smoother.
Right.
So.
Can I just circle back? So, I'm sorry, Angela, you said at the end of FY16 there was a 2,000. I'm not clear where we stand on surplus or reserve, because looks to me like we've been in deficit every year.
Yep. So
and we're projected to continue that. I'm wondering just how sustainable is that?
So this program, when I started, was carrying not a massive but somewhat significant surplus. So it has risen to as high as 5,500 and is now sort of on the downward slope. So I do think it's a program at some point that in isolation is we're going to need to look at it and say, are we comfortable continuing to run this as a deficit program on the back of other fee generating community services programs, or do we need to adjust the way that we're doing our meals with a vendor so that reimbursement and cost are netting out? But even with that, the challenge is that when you're ordering meals for a drop-in meal program, you don't know how many kids are necessarily going to come, and you also want to have enough food for the days that there are a good number of kids. So that's another challenge with a program like this, is that you either end up shorting the meals that are available so that you have a positive or zero bottom line, or you order so that you've got food to feed the kids and you end up in the hole.
Right, but so, I appreciate that.
So,
So at the end of FY16, there was a $2,000 surplus.
correct.
Does
So-
that include that $1,200
Yes.
deficit?
Yep,
Okay,
yep.
so then projected year end now is 600, and then, so we have essentially a year
Mhm.
and change left
Mhm.
before we
Need to reevaluate.
need to reevaluate.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and we didn't include the fund balances in the packet, but I have them here and Angela has them here. So if you have those questions, don't hesitate to ask. So I think this is one where I did want to kind of highlight emerging issues. So Eric, another point that I didn't make earlier in your question about sort of plans B, C, and D. So the AmeriCorps program, as folks know, is another one that's potentially on the chopping block. This is a program where we're very much dependent on our VISTA to do a lot of the legwork and organizing. If that goes away, we're going to have to figure out plan B, C, and D, and that's one where I'll be honest, I don't know yet what that looks like. I think around the food issue in particular. So I think the administrative elements we could certainly nest within our structure, but the actual being out on site, doing meal counts, delivering food, I think that's one that we're going to have to think creatively about. So.
Well, and that would be a consideration we have to make anyway, because that VISTA position ends in a year regardless, right?
Theoretically, yes. Yeah. Yeah, they're typically supposed to run in 3-year cycles, but yeah. So any other questions on the meal program?
We run meal sites, and we're going through the same thing right now. So it's everybody on meal sites is dealing with the same curiosity and trepidation. Other questions, concerns regarding the meals program? Thank you, Ray.
Yep.
Right.
All right. Thrive. We're going to trade quickly. I'll let Kirsty do.
This is quite a layout you left for me here.
It's all
All right. So after school and summer program definitely has been, we hear all the time from parents that it's sort of what's keeping them in work, keeping their availability outside of the home, whatever they need it for. And definitely the need is there for it to continue and grow, which we've known for years. And I think the one area where we have always really succeeded is in socio-emotional development and providing an environment for kids to hang out, build strong relationships with adults and with each other, and build like a little bit of a mini community outside of the school day, but in the same building. So yeah, that's really what we do best. It's been a little bit of a wonky year, as Ray alluded to at the beginning. I think with me shifting around, this program saw some pretty significant changes, and a lot of it was happening right at enrollment time. We had a little bit of overlap in the middle of the summer program, which summer staff did a fantastic job really picking up as I was moving around. But then a lot of this hit right at the beginning of the school year, and poor Jeremy was thrown into program on his first day, on the first day of the program. So I sort of gave him his attendance sheets and said, like, here you go, good luck. So yeah, I think in terms of service delivery, the program has looked better than it did last year. Jeremy and staff have done a fantastic job playing with daily structure and things like that. So certainly on the ground level, you wouldn't know that things have been going on. As of August, we are a 2-star program, so that's the state's accreditation system, so that is showing quality above and beyond regulatory compliance. We were a 1-star program the year before, and then this year miraculously came up with 4 extra points and got our extra bonus. And then hopefully in the next 2 years we'll be a 3-star program, so climbing the ladder. We are one of the programs that has benefited substantially from having my rec. We use it for our after-school billing, and have found since we've started doing that and families have the ability to pay online, that for families especially paying partial subsidy, that those guys have kept up with their payments more than in the past. So it's been a really helpful convenience. We partner with the 21C program at the school, transferring kids back and forth, making sure kids have access to all things that are available in the building all day. That partnership continues to be strong and happy. And lots of kudos to Suzanne, who is the coordinator of that program up at the school, who spends a lot of time with me just working through all the little day-to-day stuff that comes up when you have kids in a school building. And then, of course, as you guys have heard about, we've got Promise Community stuff going on, and that has positioned us to carry some of the thinking and opportunities that we've been building for school-age kids to that younger bracket, so that kids are being served before they hit school, and then ideally that service is continuing through school age. So looking at the year ahead, this year we saw some slightly lower numbers. Some of that was due to staffing changes. We were down a staff person for the majority of the school year on top of having leadership changes, so it was hard to keep safe enrollment numbers high. But overall, we saw this during the summer, and summer school saw this last year as well at JFK, that enrollment is generally down. I don't think it's a lack of interest or need. I think there's a variety of factors that will hit any given program or community at any given time. And I also think most programs run in cycles. There's sort of these waves where they're really hot and then families find other opportunities for a summer or two. So just sort of the natural.
What's slightly?
Say that again?
What's slightly?
Last year we were at about averaging 52 a day, I think, which was down from last year average of 58 a day. Something like that. Total enrollment was somewhere in the 90s, which was down from like 102 the year before for total individual kids served. So it's not like we saw like a massive drop off.
Within a margin of error, so to speak, probably.
Yeah, lots of factors too. And summer school had seen last year a drop in enrollment of probably 20 to 25 kids, so around the same range as us. On the flip side of that, we did have an increased bonus due to our second star. So under stars, every program collects a percentage on the base rate of state subsidy for each child. So for the second star, we're collecting 10% on the base rate, which is $70 a week. And that will continue going up as we move up the stars ranking. We'll also have a little bit of padding from Promise Communities to cover part of my salary. And last year, we had the costs of my rec in this budget, which is $3,500 for the year, which this year we shifted to the general fund.
The other source of revenue is at the Promise Communities grant?
Yeah. Jump in assumption too. Good question. And then we have, because we ran it as a contracted position last year, we have the difference in the contract differentiation on Jeremy's position. Or
Nope, that was all, it should be all in here as it was the year before.
I'm just saying the 15,000 down to the 5.
Yeah, no, Jeremy is paid through salaries.
It is through salaries. Okay.
So what's the contracts and professional services?
Yeah.
You can click over the detail now.
Detail. So my rec was in there, so that was part of it. Let's see.
And it's truly just in the professional services line. I know that they've been doing, yeah, so FY17 does include my rec. If you scroll over, there's a note.
Right here.
Yeah. Yeah, so it includes the fees.
We did scale some numbers down too, so supplies and training numbers. So that's, I believe, here and here were brought down to mirror actuals. We just haven't been using those budgets as we thought we would. So I think collectively between those three.
Contracts and professional services is just the one line.
Is it just the one line?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll be
And
honest.
I don't know offhand what the MyRec fee is, but it's in that $8,900 in the year to date. And there wasn't much else that was taken out of there. There was a couple of programs. The projected year end includes them spending all of their money as well on top of that.
Yeah,
As a MyRec.
as I'm looking at this, I think this might be a projection error. So
Okay.
that's a good catch on your part and a miss on ours, but this is the actual here and this is the projection. So I think focusing more in this area, I can't think offhand of anything projected that's going to be significantly more. And again, that
We have a couple of yoga pieces that have come up.
Yeah, we had a couple of fairly inexpensive enrichments. We have a yoga instructor who will come into after school a couple times a month, and she does it at a discounted rate. But the only other things that would come out of this this line at this point would be summer enrichments, and that the first week of summer camp is the last week of this fiscal year. So really, we're not going to be starting enrichments until July anyway, which will be next fiscal year.
We'll look into where that projection came from and
It's
The only
truly
time,
based on 7 months of the year finished.
times.
How
and
does
then
that-
it just does a calculation, so that makes sense.
Yeah,
Yeah, the only reason I ask is if it's a large number one year and then budgeted for lower, they're just on your land mines to knock it off.
And I think to Kirsty's point, a lot of those professional services land in the early part of the year.
Yeah.
So this number gets up quickly and
Yeah.
it sort of flatlines.
So the majority of what's in there outside of my rec was to pay for 5 trips to the sailing center and the buses that it took to get there in the summer program. And then outside of that, the only things we've paid for were the yoga lessons. So it is typically big ticket items in the summer.
Good question though. and good catch.
Other questions?
So I think one other thing I do just want to globally mention on this budget is that we have been running this budget closer to net zero with our margin. This is a budget when I started that was sort of a cash cow for us, and I think what we've really tried to do is make investments in staff and program quality, and that means we're spending more money, which I think, as we heard earlier in the proclamation, I think people are seeing the benefit of, but that's been a conscious choice. And again, this is still a budget that's performing well for us, but it's not netting $10,000–$15,000 a year as it had been 5 or 6 years ago. But that's intentionally so.
That's what enterprise budgets are for, especially. Other questions, concerns?
I wasn't sure if it was at the beginning of the presentation tonight or in our meeting the other day, but you mentioned there's been an increase in fee-paying families in the Thrive program. And it looks like there is a slight decrease overall in enrollment. So that means we have seen a decrease even more drastically in non-fee paying families enrolling in that program. Or subsidized families.
Yeah, I suppose I'm trying to think through numbers. I mean, part of it is that the program grew really rapidly for a period of years there. And so I'm not sure how much that evens out what would have otherwise been fully subsidized families dropping out. When I started, the program was about 25 to 30 kids, and it's now 50, with average daily attendance of 35. So that might.
It's a good question though. I don't know if the drop in attendance reflects that split in fee-based or subsidy-based and fee-paying families. That's an interesting question.
Well, I guess in the longer term data though, as I guess my question was just driving at that we've seen an overall increase in enrollment, not an increase in fee-paying enrollment at the expense
Correct.
of.
Yes.
The whole program has grown.
Yes.
And we're seeing the split start to even out. But I don't think that's been at the expense of subsidy families.
Great, thanks.
Any questions? Any questions, concerns from the public? Seeing, hearing none. Onward.
You are the public. The anointed public.
So I think this is one where it is worth mentioning here that we will be having likely some pretty serious conversations with the school in the next couple of months about the structure of after school. As Kirsty mentioned, we've got a really good partnership there, but we're up for renewal for our grant. This is our 5th year, and we are going to be reapplying for a 5-year block this year. And I think the city and the school both recognizing that we want to do more to kind of fully integrate those 2 after-school offerings. So stay tuned there, but we expect that'll be coming down the line.
Any issues with the firewall between city and school?
Because it's after school, it's less of concern, and there are a few instances where there are partnerships through this 21C program throughout the state between city and school. So it hasn't come up from the funder's perspective, but it's an interesting question.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it would come up from the funder's perspective. I think it would come up from the state's perspective. And I think the way the 21C program is structured that I'm aware of is that you start off with the full funding of the program, and then the idea over time is that you start to grow the local contribution. So I think the concern would be to the extent there's local school district dollars paying for 21C programming, sharing, I mean, that's where you start to...
Yeah. It's certainly on our radar to look at as we more fully integrate, but I think, again, in the interest of trying to get to a place where, from a customer perspective, it's a seamless offering. More kids can get to more things for more of the year. We are, I think, exploring options for shared staffing and whether we could do more with the subsidy-driven piece for more kids. So if anything, it might look like an expansion of Thrive, if you will, to be a licensed program that is supplemented by the 21C program at the school. But we will definitely
just flag that for your radar.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
It's a firewall, not a semi-permeable membrane.
Yeah, I mean,
No, that's
we don't call it a firewall for nothing.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is frustrating in certain situations like this.
Yeah. Right, appreciate that. So 2 quick ones, and then we'll get into the community center. And I know there's a lot, so thank you for your patience. So community gardens, this is a program that has seen a lot of growth in the last number of years. One I'm personally really proud of. I think when I started it was a little bit helter-skelter. We are now up to 3 gardens across the city, 131 plots, and proud to say we've grown this program every year that I've been here. So that's, I think, one, exciting that we're responding to community need, but I think just a reflection of a program that's being run well. And tips of the cap to Colleen and Megan and Elena and Ben and all the Vistas that have been very intimately involved in this program in the past. So, as mentioned, big accomplishments. We did expand last year to West Street and are growing that garden again. We heard from a lot of our new American gardeners in particular that they needed bigger plots, so we have accommodated that at West Street, which has been exciting. Colleen did a great job last year of managing some public plots, which we used for a farmer's market booth and also to feed into the food shelf last year. So that's something we expect to continue again, using MyRec for registration. And folks may have seen some action in the greenhouse again this year. Really strong kind of group partnership with ALV, Common Roots, the city, to get that program kind of off life support and back up and running. So it's worth peeking in through the little slats if you get a chance. It's jamming in there. There's tons of stuff growing, lots of activity there every day. So very exciting. And we have, if you go to the next slide, added the greenhouse to this budget this year. In the past, that had been run exclusively by AALV. This year, we're running it more through our program, but that's a net zero proposition. So any money coming in from rentals of pallets is going back to management of that through a contract with Common Roots. So nice way to get that resource going, bring in some expertise, and not impact the budget. So dollars and cents on this one. Again, this is a budget that's performed well for us over the last couple of years. We do have, I should mention, 2 garden managers, which are out of the general fund. So they are kind of our eyes and ears in the ground and are paid for, ends up being, I think, 6.25 hours per week that they're in the gardens, checking in, interacting with gardeners, helping us organize events. So that's a really nice bonus resource for us in the summer. It's hard for Colleen to be everywhere during those months. So, but that's not captured in this budget. So yeah, overall plot fees come in, expenses go out to sort of keep the place looking good, and the garden bed's built, and that's that.
Questions regarding the community gardens budget? Any questions or concerns from the public?
Awesome program and great job with such a little amount, and makes a big difference. All right, I think we're up to the library.
Library's next. So this one again should be pretty straightforward. So the we're anticipating running this one as a net zero, and they have grants that they are expecting to apply for this year. But in terms of accomplishments, and again, some of these are overall, not specifically through their program budget. New youth services coordinator, another great year of homework help work. Worth noting that the homework help budget had been captured in this in years past through the grant we have in partnership with 21C. That's now being run through the general fund, so that money is not coming through this budget mechanism anymore. But we're still getting money to support Elsie's time. And again, the meals program integration, I think, has been a huge boost there for clients. And exciting happenings with the friends as well. We just did trivia 2 weeks ago down at Monkey House, which apparently was very successful. So again, 3 grants that they're expecting to apply for this year, and it's all money in, money out. So this is one where, to your question earlier, Eric, if we don't get the grants, we don't do the thing. And all pretty minimal, largely related to purchases of materials for activities and/or for circulation. So, and again, big drop because of that grant going into the general fund.
Questions, concerns about this budget from council? Questions or concerns from the public?
Great, thank you.
So, and one thing you'll likely be seeing from us at some point in the near future, a request for reserves from the library to bring on potentially a library page for the summer. Amanda is going to be out on maternity, which is very exciting, but we're going to need to figure out some staffing. So it's kind of mirroring that youth teen employment program that we did a couple years ago, which worked very well. So that's that. All right.
Always the most interesting. I won't say interesting.
That's a word. All right. So, are we ready to go on to the community center? Mm-hmm. Okay. So I think this is one that it's fair to say hits a lot of these buttons in terms of the vision. Some of these are, I think a little bit more of a crooked line perhaps, but again, I think the vision and mission, and I've said this straight along, of that building were right and are right for this community. As we well know, I think there's some logistical and mechanical pieces there on the financing side that maybe weren't quite as right. So, this is nice to step back and feel like we're in the spirit of what the community is trying to do down there, but also want you to know that I understand there's a financial challenge with that. In terms of accomplishments from last year, in terms of rentals, we were able to convert over to MyRec, which has been great and made it a lot easier for folks trying to use that space for public events. Halloween event, as I mentioned earlier, was a huge success down there back in October. And again, as you all know, lots of work on that space just from a thought perspective in terms of what's happening next around City Hall movement, future of that property, that building, etc. So I think it's fair to say there have been a number of things kind of in a holding pattern because of some of those conversations. And, I think as the rubber hits the road a bit further on that discussion, we'll see some things move down at the community center. So big changes between the years. So the teen center space does remain vacant, and we are budgeting for it to remain so. With that said, we are hoping in the next couple weeks here to get that out for some potential short-term leases that would be in either month-to-month blocks, 6-month blocks, something that would jive with what we're expecting to be the trajectory of other conversations on the property, but also that doesn't leave a big empty space that isn't generating revenue or, more importantly, honestly, generating activity for the building. So stay tuned there. And then we did adjust last year, and I may ask Angela to help with details if there are questions on it. The general fund adjustment for this building did scale up. A lot of that is reflective of the insurance bill that that building pays, as well as some of Angela's time, my time, I think a little bit of public works time, city manager time. So
piece of the audit, piece of legal, yeah.
So that number isn't a dart. It is reflective of expenses, but it did climb last year. So and that's a separate spreadsheet, Kirsty. So this budget you'll see too has one extra column. So unlike the other budgets which passed the commission with flying colors, this one again this year did not. So the commission did have a sort of counter proposal to what I brought to them, which we wanted to bring forward for discussion tonight. And I think again with the understanding that there are implications on the general fund, which has already been approved, but in the spirit of honoring the commission's work and their thinking on this, wanted to bring it forward to public session here. So again, overall, you'll see revenue down. My hope is that that number will climb back up again if we are able to get some tenancy in the O'Brien Center's teen center space. We are expecting at this point that we won't have a gap between tenants in the YMCA space. We are moving along with negotiations with a new tenant for that space and expect that we should be able to get a pretty close to seamless transition there in terms of timing. So
what's the expected term, or is that not?
In terms of the length, not clear at this point.
Okay, that's enough.
Yep. Obviously it's, I think, helpful to have longer term on some level, helpful to have shorter term on another. So I think we're trying to keep our options open there and also be competitive as we recruit a tenant. So we are expecting, again, from a budgetary perspective, to not see a gap there. And I feel pretty good that that's possible. On the expense side, these are really numbers that, by and large, we've, I think, based on actuals and not built a lot of fluff in. This is a building that is reaching a point in its age where things are starting to crack and break and bend and not be plumb anymore. And so I think we don't want to create a budget that's unnecessarily small for some of these building maintenance, equipment maintenance lines. But again, everything here is pretty much based on reality and actuals. And truthfully, where we can, we've really tried to pinch pennies in this budget and not overspend. So, again, we're not going out at the end of the fiscal year and going on a shopping spree because there's $30,000 left in this budget. If there's 30 grand left, there's 30 grand left, and we're leaving it there. So the change that the commission presented, and then I'll shut my app and let you guys ask questions or do your thing, was to reduce the tax payment, and instead of that to do a pilot. So their proposed pilot, instead of a tax bill of $19,600, was a pilot of $2,600. Candidly, that number came from trying to get the deficit down to $50,000. So they cut 17 off to get to that point. There wasn't beyond that particular calculus to that reduction. So That was their proposal that they voted on at their meeting back in March. But again, with understanding and I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think we did a pretty good job of letting them know that this was going to impact a budget that was already set in stone and voted on. So maybe a ceremonial statement, but again, one I felt like we needed to bring forward to honor their work.
What's the current balance on the reserve? And I guess I'd ask for after.
We are currently projecting at the end of this year that it'll be about 151,000 left.
Yeah, so this is right now proposing to use over 30% of that, 67. Yeah. Okay. You know, this has been a ticking clock for some time now, and we've watched, which I should totally appreciate and accept their desire to make, to try to come to a place that's equitable and reasonable for the community center. And it's a building, it should have some form of a reserve left beyond grabbing from a programming perspective. With that said, there has been a tremendous amount of investment from a time and resource perspective, from a council and community perspective, to develop a long-term strategy and plan that includes that property, with our land and property analysis that included massing potentially of a new city hall, and the other peripheral conversations and discussions that we had around what that project might look like to make that property flow correctly. There's a reality that it's not going to cash flow the way that it was hoped, and that there will have to be an alternative. Dinging our general fund budget for it, just financially, unfortunately, to me, doesn't make a lot of sense. Neither does sitting and letting a fund balance wither down. I understand.
We also might be limited in that they're talking about removing the tax bill. We have a number of other properties, the parking garage, the ground lease under Spinner, where we are required to have a tax bill because we lease the properties.
Yeah.
So we may not be able to remove a tax bill.
I don't think under the rules you could do a pilot. I don't think that that's legally possible, because in large part because of that there's several.
Most of that building is leased.
Yeah. Also, I don't frankly know that we could arrange a pilot to ourselves like that. Unfortunately, I appreciate I think though the statement though that's being made, and that's the important piece. And I appreciate their work and thought and the urgency behind it.
Yep.
I guess I would say that I think we have moved forward with a really big swing at this with the property piece that we're going to be making a decision on. That includes kind of 3 different pieces of land in motion at the same time. It's just not something that moves at the pace any of us would like it to.
But at this rate, we have to have we're looking at 2.5 years maybe.
Yeah. I think the reality is we've got a few big decisions sitting on our lap that we have to make decisions on.
Yeah.
And I think from a staff's perspective, those are decisions we're hoping to bring to you in the next 6 months, so as not to present a budget like this to you in the future.
Correct.
We don't want to get down to that year where we don't have reserves to cover operating. We want to provide you with solutions during FY18 to plan before we get to the planning for FY19.
Correct.
I think too, from a larger perspective, regardless of what happens with these reserves, we did also receive the strong recommendation that this, from our auditor, that this be integrated into the general fund.
Which is definitely in the planning for FY19's presentation.
Okay. So it's going to be more difficult to sort all that out from a financial perspective. From a siloed reserve perspective, I guess we'll need to be, I mean, I know with your wizardry that you can.
Still has to balance.
Right. Yeah. But I think the discussion is it's depending on the tax rate, and that one way or another we could be looking at having to integrate that in if there's not a long-term solution passed. And I think that's, I think to do it after the fact, though, right now doesn't.
Yeah.
From a functional perspective, isn't something that I would endorse unless you guys are full guns blazing into that. Comments, concern. I mean, a number of concerns, but
Seems like every time this comes up, we kind of like brush on the current lease agreements and like price per square foot, and are those competitive? Have we modeled what happens if we were to raise that? How does that look as we have like people coming on at different times?
So there's a couple leases that are up and that we're working on renegotiating at this point. Challenge with this building and structurally is that there's an enormous amount of common space that right now we charge CAM on. So our per square foot is pretty low, but when you factor in CAM, and then if you rolled it all together, it's actually a pretty, I don't want to say high, but it's definitely in the ballpark of a market rate for per square foot. It's just the way we calculate it is more explicit to the common areas.
Section you're in, the only
Right.
sections that get charged for common areas are the places that adjoin those common areas. So the family, health, and dental, and the Vermont Works for Women space, they don't pay PM on the common spaces.
Yeah. And some of those are long-term leases that, we're locked into on some level in terms of
And they tell you how much
escalators.
you can raise, and it's CPI from December to December in most cases. There's one where it's April to April, and then there's another one where it stipulates the highest amount of per square footage I can charge.
So they're all, unfortunately, all a little bit
Different.
still. But
And we looked at what we could potentially increase it if it was the December to December, and it wasn't very much. It was 1.4,
I think, 1.4%. So fairly minimal.
Not enough to.
I mean, every little bit, but I think it ended up being like $3,500 total on the budget. I mean, it wasn't dramatic. So.
I know that for the public hearing portion of this item tonight, there were some members of the public. There was Hal here from the committee who was going to talk a little bit about the prior meeting. It looks like he had to take off. We don't have members from the public, but I'm wondering if staff who was at the meeting could kind of give us their take of a rundown for that.
At the commission meeting? Sure. I mean, I think it was not an, and I'll others chime in, but I think it was not an uncommon conversation as to the one we've had in past years, which is basically just them saying, listen, we don't like putting our stamp on a budget that comes in 67,000 in the red. That's not good business. I think they understand, and certainly I think everybody in this room understands that to get to a different space is going to require a pretty significant shakeup, and I think this is them sort of, in essence, asking for that. Again, I think they passed this knowing that it may well be a ceremonial statement, and that because the general fund had passed, that may be water over the dam. But I think they felt pretty strongly that they needed to kind of ratchet up. Last year they just shot it down and left it at that, and this year wanted to take the subsequent step of kind of putting a counter proposal out there. Which they hadn't done in years past. So
much as I think we're hearing from you, they want a long-term solution that fixes this systemic problem.
Yeah.
And I think this proposal was their attempt to force that question. I think we're all kind of in adamant agreement that needs to happen.
Thank you.
And I'll say too, I would appreciate 5 minutes at the beginning of their next meeting just to directly address from this group's perspective.
Sure.
That I think that a group that puts that strong of a statement forward deserves a response, and happy to try to summarize whatever happens here tonight too, and what happens the next meeting as well.
Great. I think that would go a long way. I think they'd appreciate that.
You're coming too.
The commission tour.
Okay. Other questions, comments? Again, number of concerns understood on that one, but
On a positive note, we did just hire a facilities tech within Public Works that's slated to start on April 24th. So I think from a just brass tacks down there, building management stuff, I'm hoping will be dramatically improved just day to day. And it is, as I joke, rock throwing season, so the beginning of it. So we are starting to see the uptick of youth behavior and kind of unsavory stuff down there. So trying to get proactive and be ahead of that a little bit. But I think with limited staffing on site, we're doing what we can. But certainly welcome if people are hearing things or seek things that are concerning to pass that back. Definitely want to hear that feedback, even if it's not always glowing.
you guys do amazing work. And you do a really fantastic job of finding funding in a lot of cases for it, so thank you very much. This was an exciting shift that happened, you know, what are we, 5 years ago, Ray? Since you started this investment path, and I don't think it's exceeded all expectations, I think, from a reasonable standpoint, and that's because of you guys, not because we've dumped tons of money on you to do it. So kudos, congratulations, and thank you. It's a big part about what helps people want to live here and be part of the community, and also what helps people want to stay here and be part of the community. So, and there's the big benchmarks. The Halloween thing was unreal, and the community reads program and parking meeting somehow turned into like one of the biggest events of the year down there too, right? But that's way to go.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And then I think capital budget was on there as well.
It's a separate item. It's nothing.
Yeah. So because the reserves are so scant, at this point we're addressing things as they come up and making requests if we need to go outside of budget to use reserves, but it just didn't feel like there's nothing imminent that needs to be dealt with this year, and it didn't feel right when we're staring at a dwindling deficit to be going out and making requests of a capital variety at this point. So hence
it's still nice to have it to see what needs are on there. So now is that pool? That's the whole pool, right? The 140.
No. That's just the.
Just teasing.
Don't open that can of worms. No, that's just the aquatics therapy space in the Y.
I was hoping that was the cost for the whole thing. So
me too.
Disappointing answer. Thank you very much.
All right.
Any questions for Kirsty or for Ray?
No.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And for doing such a great job during transition periods between the two. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Can you just turn off the projector?
And someday we will get our 5th signature for your things. I'm throwing somebody under the bus for that one.
We could do that now.
Okay. Okay, so that concludes, those will come back next time for review. We have up next approval of city council liaison and appointments. So we had what I would call robust conversation at the last meeting about possibilities, with everybody saying that they're going to take some stuff home to sleep on and think about, and then come back and make a decision. We had also hoped to add another voice in here, but it looks like you get left with what's going to be there. Yeah. So I guess with that we'll open it up. Let me see if I can summarize what we talked about last time. I thought that people were at least open to the idea that maybe moving around is a good thing. And correct me if I'm wrong, or there's been any rethinking on that. I think we heard from Eric and Nicole that Eric interests lied with administrative services or public safety. Nicole was the same, but having completed a tour on public safety, there might be a natural flip and switch there that exists. Brian, if that were the case, that would leave you with one place to go that would be new, which would be community services, with a flip of Corrigan to public works. So that was the landscape as I recalled the conversation, but correct me if I'm wrong, correct me if there's been different thinking, and anybody thoughts since last time? Any concerns about the flip and switch? Doing the rearranging around, and whether we strongly feel like that's, you know, again, these were kind of rules and thoughts when we put the commission process together. I don't know, that was John Little, Sarah Robinson. That was going back several years when it was created. It was a year before I came in. And the idea was that that switch was important to keep circulation. Mm-hmm. It's not like mandated somewhere. But
I mean, I can see the value in continuity as well in some ways. I think when it, you know, you don't want to see somebody serving in the same liaisonship for like 6 years or something like that. But could play the devil's advocate. I see there being value in both. Mm-hmm. So I could see, especially, and that's from somebody who hasn't served as liaison to any of these commissions. But just opening up that I could see the perspective of if somebody had served on a certain commission for 2 years and was right in the thick of certain work they're really passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
Maintain where I was last time. Whatever. Really, I'm fine with, I think, switch it up. Why not for me? So, you guys have a drive to do public safety and administration. I'm cool with community service. Just put Corrigan at the water treatment plant.
Yep. I'm good to move. I went to the last Public Safety Commission meeting and gave a signal that may not be me next time, but I certainly think having a better sense of your more depth of information and spread across different departments is a good thing.
okay, so in the interest of time, administration, or excuse me, public safety?
Yep.
Sounds acceptable?
Sounds great.
Community services? Sounds acceptable? Administration? Sounds acceptable? Look, they're smiling there. Oh. They would have done that for any of you though, too.
No.
They got the attorney, so it's free legal fees. Okay, if that sounds good, we'll roll with it. So, from what I've heard, I think the slate presented includes assigning Nicole Mace to administration, Eric to public safety, Brian Sweeney to community services, and Brian Corrigan to public works. Any questions or concerns?
Do we need to do anything with the other assignments?
I think we heard from Brian that he was interested in continuing on with the WCP.
Yep.
I think we'll have a conversation about the Coalition for a Safe and Peaceful Community. Okay. I think that would be good to have with Brian. That's where Brian is technically sitting on there now. Check to see how that's going.
Okay.
That makes sense?
Yep.
Sound good? Okay. Any questions or concerns from the public? You guys are...
Lucky you.
Okay, so with that, I would entertain a motion to approve the council liaison designees as stated in the slate that I presented a second ago.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Nicole, second by Eric. Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed? Motion carries. All right, and I lost the agenda. Okay, and now we have K, conflict of interest policy.
So I'm going to talk about these, the two policies in front of you tonight, which is conflict of interest policy and the mayor and council rules of procedure draft policy, together for just a minute, and then we can take them up separately. So I think very important to know is the policy documents that currently exist before these are in draft were very appropriate for the time in which they were written, when there was more change needed, more description needed. There was a lot, they were very detailed about roles and responsibilities. They were less referential to documents that have since changed, specifically state statute and the city charter. So what I've proposed is essentially taking 3 policies and combining them into 2 policies. So first, you have a current conflict of interest policy, and I'm proposing a rewrite of that. So I'll stick with that one for a minute and get back to the second one later on with the next agenda item. So this conflict of interest policy as drafted, it mirrors the Vermont League of Cities and Towns proposed policy. It references the state statute on municipal authority and our specific city charter, and outlines what a conflict of interest means, definitions, how to treat potential conflicts when they arise at the appointed body level, how to disclose, and what actions the council can take or the group can take if conflicts arise. Happy to go answer any questions or go over more in detail if you'd like. One important thing to note, and why I think it's important to keep this document separate from the other document, is that this would apply to any public body of the city of Winooski, which is not only the council, but any relevant board or commission you appoint as well. So it continues across the stream, not just for your body. I think it's important to keep that separate.
And that's not true of the previous conflict of interest policy we have now?
No, that is true of that current policy, but there was a discussion a couple of meetings ago about combining them all into one, and the feeling that, and I was recommending keeping them as 2 separate policies because this one is so standalone to what it is and to those bodies down the road.
So one recommendation on that would probably be I think they have the conversation is to do a 101 on this for each of the commissions after it's passed. Yeah, I mean, especially it gets tricky, you know, you have a business owner on the planning commission as an example, not to pick on one person, but you know, I don't know.
Yeah, it's good to review and have people sign off that they understand this, or however, you know, the process is, but.
Exactly. So our intent, I think that's a great recommendation. What if adopted to go to the commissions and describe it? I think our intention also would be, as people are newly appointed to boards and commissions, to also send this out to them with their appointment letter to ensure that they understand, honestly, both this and the Vermont open meeting law requirements. And maybe the volunteer handbook as well.
Questions or concerns about the language?
I mean, I do have one question. Overall, I just want to say I think it's a fantastic document. I think that good and open, transparent government is super crucial to public trust and accountability. The one question that I did have was on Article 7, consideration of recusal. At the very end of that paragraph, it mentions the public body may take evidence pertaining to the conflict and, if appropriate, adjourn to an executive session to address the conflict. I know later on in Article 10, Section 8, subsection 2, says executive session may be used for such discussions in accordance with, and then state statute that's relevant to moving to executive session. Is that the same for this article? Or, yes. You know, what is if appropriate? You know, that just seemed a little vague, and when it would or wouldn't be appropriate for the council to go into executive session to discuss information that one of us discloses about a potential conflict of interest.
I believe it is the same statute, and I think I could reference that there to clarify.
Okay.
I think it's to evaluation or of a public officer or employee is the subsection that you could go in. So it's meant for those types of sticky conversations. If a person's refusing to engage or wants to have a conversation about why, and it's sensitive information. I think it's that person's they can request that it happen in executive session in order to, or that it happen in public session.
Right, and I think I just wanted to ensure that our language wasn't making it so that then we would be granted the authority through this policy to go into executive session for a circumstance that does not normally fall in under the reasons in statute that say we can go into executive session.
Yep, I'll review that. I can add that and clarify. Another thing I should have noted at the beginning is I have also provided these documents to our city attorney to review in advance of your approval. So some of this may also be caught during that review as well.
It feels like it could almost be fixed with a comma in accordance with statutory, you know what I mean?
And that's why I brought up Article 10, I think it was, that
in accordance and within the limits of.
Section 313.
But good, yeah, I mean, good point. Echo that you did an excellent job with it.
Yeah, it's very clear.
Well, so to be clear, the Vermont League of Cities and Towns has excellent model policies that have been fully legally vetted, and this is basically that policy with our charter specifics inserted. So kudos to the league and our membership with the league for giving us access to these models.
I mean, just accept it.
Yeah, just take the credit. I think that's part of the fee we pay them, allows us to do that, right? Take the credit.
No, but still. Other questions on conflict of interest? Any language concerns? That's a great question. Other than the admonishment piece, that's the only one that makes me a little nervous. But
yeah, I did.
So, I mean, there you do have. That is your, without the ability of the council to undo one another, which doesn't exist within our charter as it does with some other Vermont municipal charters. Admonishment is really the tool you have at your disposal.
Yep. Okay. Let's not get in any situations where we're admonishing each other. Any other questions or concerns before we just go ahead and bring up, I think like you said, maybe just go ahead and cover, well, maybe just.
This is just for discussion, so
yeah,
I don't,
okay.
Unless there are other comments that you would like me to look into from legal perspective before bringing it back. If there's anything like that, I'd welcome those at any time.
Any questions, concerns from the public? Great. So seeing and hearing none, thank you very much, and we'll move on to the mayor and council rules of procedure.
So the second policy I'm recommending, and again, the policies that are currently in place are very comprehensive and great documents and were appropriate for that time. What I'm proposing here with this mayor and council rules of procedure is one document that would replace the existing mayor and councilor protocols and city meeting procedures. Again, this comes from a league model that's been vetted through the Municipal Assistance Center. It outlines the requirements both of Vermont open meeting laws that you all are held to, as well as your appointed boards and commissions. Goes over the organization of the city council with the specifics from our charter outlined, describes agendas and what happens at council meetings, and then goes on to some of those other sections, including constituent relations with the media, the use of electronic records, how to communicate with city staff, and emergency responses, and the liaison and commission assignments that we just discussed. But in briefer language, and I think reflects what we currently do. So again, happy to walk through this in more detail if you'd like, or to answer any specific questions.
Do we have a constable?
Sorry?
Do we have a constable?
Yes.
We do. So we gotta have somebody to arrest the police chief if that's.
So required.
Scott. Is it Scott McGivern? Excellent.
I had a question on Article 4, Section A, or Section 1, Subsection A, in regards to if a counselor or member of the public or staff wants to bring an item to the agenda for a council meeting, they contact the mayor or city manager. There's a protocol for that, and that the mayor, in consultation with the city manager, shall determine the final content of the agenda. I am interested if there is a way that city councilors can receive notification of those requests for public hearing items, and if a request is denied, reason for that denial, just in thought that we will likely get questions from our constituents. If there was a valid reason why they were not added to the agenda, they might get in touch with us and ask, hey, I requested to be on the agenda for this upcoming Monday, and it looks like I'm not. What, you know, I mean, I'm sure that there would be communication to them from your part, but we would likely get those inquiries as well.
So, yes, is the answer to the question of do we do it? If we do get something, and it's happened, people have said, hey, I want to come in and give a presentation, where it just didn't make sense or wasn't pertinent to kind of anything, it was just a statement, we've said no. When that happens, just send around an email that says that. In terms of codifying it, we could think about how that could be done. I guess a piece I'd want to be careful about is what justifies a formal request. I mean, there's like,
What rises to a formal request?
yeah, I mean, you get people all the time who throw something out there who might say that's a request, and you know, I don't want to put either this position or that in a space where it's, well, I asked for it to be on agenda. It's like, you just kind of mentioned it in passing, and there's all kinds of different variations that come out afterwards.
So I do know in here that requests for agenda items from the public must be put in writing. So that is an attempt to get down that path. I think a little about your request. So from a staff perspective, what we do is try and keep the items on the agenda to actions that are within your purview to decide on or adjudicate. So to the extent that a member of the public wants to come and talk about something that you don't take, it's not necessarily on your regular agenda or within your authority to take action on, we encourage people to come to public comment. Anyone's allowed to address the council about pretty much anything they want during public comment. So while it might be perceived as being denied an agenda item, we would always encourage people to come and address the body in that vein. I think it's for the council to decide, you know, I have written in here that a public request must come in writing. So to the extent we could add a sentence or two if it was the council's interest to say, if that request is denied, council as a whole will be notified. But again, that denial will likely come with an encouragement to come to public comment.
Right, and that was my guess in thinking through this. It's likely 90+% of the time where that is the case. It's, you know, with that, but this is a great item to bring to the public hearing before the council, and I don't envision there being any conflict or interest with, you know, I just envision there being a vulnerability in the future for a lot of people. They don't know our charter, they don't know necessarily their ability to attend a public hearing, and that is kind of a fail-safe. Even if there was the opportunity for misuse of power in the future, of denying somebody access to the city council agenda, the fail-safe mechanism is that they can still go and air their grievance during the public hearing, and there's the public accountability factor there. But if not everybody is equipped with the knowledge and understanding that they can do that, you know, I just think if we're putting together a policy, this is something that we could add pretty simply just to ensure protection of the public, you know, going forward.
Why don't we take that back and see if others feel too that that's something you'd be accepting of in some way, shape, or form, to see if we can work a notification of denied agenda items in.
I guess I would just be concerned about creating, you know, I don't know, approved, denied versus like, well, that, you know, versus the redirect to open comment or public comment. I'm not aware of it being a problem. I've never been contacted by anyone who's been denied an agenda item, but I'm happy to, if staff can come up with language that you think is workable. But I am concerned about labeling something as a denial when it's really trying to redirect people to the appropriate opportunity to address their concerns.
So,
I don't think it, you know, I think within the current language of how it's written, it wouldn't necessarily, we wouldn't need to add this approval denial mechanism, but, you know, as it says, wishes to be added to the meeting agenda, shall determine the final content of the agenda if items for request are not added to the agenda. I don't know, something along those lines. Notificate, you know, members will be notified that they have the ability to attend the public hearing to bring those items forward, and counselors will be notified of items not added to the formal agenda, of requested items not added. You know, that's just throwing spaghetti at the wall. I definitely hear that concern, though. I think that that's valid, and we want to be careful to not create some new bureaucracy of approval as well.
So just explain functionally how it would typically work is if somebody brought an issue to the city manager, the way it's worked in the past, where for any litany of reasons it couldn't be an agenda item, just functionally couldn't. It wasn't in our purview, it wasn't something that the council had, it wasn't a policy level. Those conversations are usually had between mayor and manager about that, and then it's communicated usually by the manager, and then a lot of times backup supported, like this just isn't, that's not where this goes. And I'm struggling with this idea of labeling things as being denied now. It's a good point that I hadn't thought through. I'm trying to think of a way to capture the intent of it without, you know, without making it feel like, number one, like there's almost added pressure there. Because what has happened before is, you know, the manager's brought something forward and said, and this isn't specific Jesse, is I don't know if we can get this, I don't know if this makes sense as an agenda item. We've talked through it, and it actually we have made room in some way, shape, or form for it to be on the agenda so it could be publicly aired in a policy format. But
I'm wondering if there's I'm thinking out loud a little here, if there's a way to capture your intent of not stifling access with not getting into the denial. If we keep it as an affirmative statement, so if I add a line, you know, request for agenda items from the public must be put in writing to the manager. Member of the public will be informed if this is appropriate for public comment or will be scheduled as a specific agenda item. And keep it that you put something in writing, it goes to one of these two paths. Either you're informed to come to a public comment, or you're informed that it's an agenda item. So it's an affirmative decision rather than ever a denial.
So I don't think the process by which items are added to the agenda is what I'm driving at, but rather informing the rest of the council of items that were not added to the agenda that were requested. So let's like take it to a human perspective, and let's just like, I know a fair amount about how government works and what my rights are, and so I know, for instance, that if I were to request an item to be added as a public agenda item, it were to not be added to the agenda, I would know that I can attend the public hearing to still bring up the issue that I want to discuss, and I would also know that my communications with city staff and with the mayor are public record. Most individuals who interface with government don't have that knowledge or those tools to know those things. And so in the instance where there could be opportunity for misuse down the future, because these are policies that we're ideally, you know, we're setting good policies that we don't always need to revisit every year to change. I think that that's just one protection that you can build in. And so I guess it's not in the vein of how we approve items to be added to the agenda. I think that's a great process that we have in place right now. But I guess just notification, and a lot of times the answer will be as simple as this is an item that is not within the council's purview. So the member of the public was suggested to attend the public and bring it up during public hearing, for instance. But it's just one kind of mechanism by which we can have that information for our constituents.
Yeah, I mean, what's being proposed is to build a check on the entire agenda process. I guess, I don't know. I get where I start to struggle is if it's gonna go that route, then how far do you expand that check in terms of a public process? Does each agenda item need to be agreed upon by council? And that's not the way we make agendas. So I'm trying to figure out from a process perspective how to meet the need without it being.
Or is it more important to inform whoever is applying about the channels that they have? So like, you know, either A, you know, you have an agenda item, or B, you know, there's an opportunity for public comment, and you always have full access to all of your city councilors through these channels. I'm just reminding them that if they wanted, they have full ability and rights to reach out on their own, so you kind of leave it in their court, where if it's important enough to them where they feel like they've been wronged by not getting an official agenda item, then they're empowered to reach out to city council instead of it having to go through like a more official channel every single time through staff to us.
Right. So I can see that, but I think where that's still missing, what I'm driving at, is us not being notified that a member of the public is getting that information, and there could be times in the future down the road with different people at the table where that information about their options might not be sent out. So really this is just about the information, it's not about the process at all. And what I would envision, if possible, is the same process by which council items are approved now, with just an email notification or the council being included on those emails to the individual that requested the item, that these are the items that are being added to the agenda. This item is not being added to the agenda, here's why. It's nothing about the process of how we approve which items are added to the agenda. It's just us being able to get information about which items that aren't, and that they weren't.
I need to think about this, to be blunt, from a functional, to understand what the implications are going to look like on the functional end. Just because I
mean, it's almost like asking, I don't know, I don't really need to know all the contacts you receive from people who want to discuss city business with you that may morph into,
that's part of the problem
because that's how your agendas sort of get formed, is your read on what some issues are that require council.
So, and with all due respect, a lot of times an issue's been out there for a really long time before it becomes an agenda item. Mm-hmm. And there's a reason why we bring it forward when we bring it forward, and it's not to keep anybody in the dark. It's because it's either not ready, or there's logistical issues with bringing it forward when we're trying to bring it forward. So there is a lot to that that's really nuanced. That's not a clear cut answer back and forth, and any communication I have is totally public and can be requested at any point in time. And I mean, I'm respectful of the idea of somebody not understanding that as their right. But I guess I would also question the idea then that suddenly the enforcement mechanism for that becomes counselors getting some notification and then trying to make an assessment of a situation that it's not reasonable to expect that you would have had the context for some of the decision.
Well, and I think that's it exactly, is it's not in the vein of enforcement, it's in the vein of you have a really good reason for why something's not added to the agenda, and then that way I'm not in the dark when somebody asks me, hey, I thought that I wanted this added to the agenda and it wasn't. Mm-hmm. And I can say, oh, well, here's the reason. This is the sound, logical reason for why it wasn't. Mm-hmm. This is just being better equipped with the information.
Yeah, and I think we try very hard to do that. It's the codification of that where I can see getting sticky sometimes in situations where it doesn't make sense. It's trying to find a way to include, I mean, I'm trying to work language in my brain in some way that makes it so it doesn't put us in a really uncomfortable situation between this seat and that one, where it feels like there's editing taking place that's then subject to some kind of notification standard that nobody really understands where the lines clearly are on. And then people get upset afterwards with, well, wait a second, it's kind of like, well, there are a lot of times where people are like, I want this done now. And I want to understand why, and they're not happy with the answer that you give them of, it's not ready, and you're not ready, and this issue's not ready. And it's going to take us some more time to get to an answer. That kind of happens, not, I won't say often, but it's not totally unusual. And there's a method to it. It's not just, I mean, that's the way government works. Sorry.
I would just, if you're contacted by a constituent who's concerned about not having something put on the agenda, I feel comfortable with an approach that says the mayor and the city manager put together the agenda. I can check in with them and see, or if you've already had that conversation, I'm not going to redirect you to somebody else, but thanks for letting me know. I'll check in with the mayor, and then I can circle back with you, so that if it rises to the level of someone has a concern, there's a clear, we know based on this policy who sets the agenda. I do think having a sort of these are the options for expressing, sharing views at a city council meeting. I like that suggestion, but I do think I'm comfortable with a process that doesn't have us getting all potential circumstances where somebody might be grieved by the fact that they didn't get the response they were looking for, whether it's through the agenda setting process or otherwise, by asking these guys to keep us notified through email or some other process. I just think it's more manageable if the information flows back to you guys. Look, I heard from somebody who's not happy. What happened?
And there is a responsibility to share information that's pertinent for you to do your job. I mean, that exists. That's there. We have a group specific to an issue that wanted to come in and play a clip from a news media outlet and then give a presentation afterwards. That just, quite frankly, it was nothing but a specified statement on something that's just kind of like, guys, I'm sorry, we're not. It's got no new information that's pertinent to any issue that we're considering, and from an efficiency standpoint, there's lots of outlets for something like that. And when something like that happens, I email all of you and say, hey, this is the way this went. There's also times where somebody says, gosh, we really want this permit approved now, and staff is saying, it's not ready, and there's a bunch of issues, and there's a reason why it's not ready. So there's all these different situations I can think of that would make it mechanically challenging to have it really make sense without sending out kind of more background information that is probably really, number one, in some cases needs to or is appropriate to come out at certain stages in time based on the application status. Does that make sense?
It does. I don't think I feel like there's still fundamentally, like having the backflow I think is really important. If somebody gets a hold of one of us and says this item wasn't added, and we say, I'm going to check in with the mayor and the city manager, that's super critical. But I run into people all the time that say, oh, how many city councilors do we have? Who are they? People have no idea what the structure of government is and how to access that. Yeah. So I think that's really the basis of my thought.
Yeah, I guess, I don't know, what we're essentially doing is building another check on the way the decisions are made, and I don't know if we make another rule for that reason, that I can see potentially being challenging in some spots. Would be the way I'd question it. And it's hitting cold, so, I mean, we can think about it, and consider it some more. You know, I don't know that we're gonna be able to, from what I'm hearing, hash it out totally. I think if we can satisfy the idea or the spirit of it in some way, shape, or form, but from a mechanical standpoint, I don't know, I see some potential problems for it.
And this is an item for discussion tonight, right?
Yeah.
We're not voting on it, so there's the opportunity to look into it and see if there is a feasible way to do that people are comfortable with, that we could vote on in the future.
Do the old, let's think about it. With the caveat that I'm having some technical issues getting there. So, I mean, I don't know. Does anybody want any last parting words on it in terms of instruction of what to consider? No. Okay.
I have a quick question on something else.
Do it.
Okay. All business shall be conducted in the same order as it appears on the noticed agenda, except that any addition to or deletion from the noticed agenda must be made as the first act of business at the meeting.
Good question.
So our agenda review, does that need to move up to make that work?
That's a good question. Or could we, is that rule that it has to be the very first item?
First item.
Even before the Pledge of Allegiance?
Well, certainly before the consent agenda.
Part of the consent agenda, yeah. The intent of that rule is that people who come to the meeting for an item want to know where it's going to be on the agenda. So technically it is supposed to be first. I mean, I think one could make the argument after the Pledge of Allegiance, because that's setting the stage for the meeting. It's not actually an action, but I think it should go up before consent agenda.
And I mean, really, we're most likely not going to change the order of public comment, consent agenda, city update stuff anyway. So like, really, it's kind of falling in the same.
But the law is pretty clear.
But if this says it has to be first, we should like move it up. That's all.
No, but tonight's a good example, right? Is we took an item and we moved it after that, which by this rule, it would not be allowed. We would need to have foresight and.
I think there is, I think I put in there.
It's any
That
addition
you
to
can
or deletion
change it.
from has to be made as the first order of business.
Oh, so
But
reordering.
we can reorder throughout the course of the meeting.
Yeah, any order adjustment to the notice agenda, for example, changing the order of business, postponing or tabling actions may be made by a majority vote of the body. You can always move things around mid-meeting, you just have to vote to do it.
You just can't add something.
You shouldn't add still.
Delete
Okay.
it from, unless it's done as the first.
So that's
So we
the
should
last
still
sentence
put
in
agenda
3.
review at the top if we need to add or delete, but we can reorder
On the
willy-nilly.
fly. Willy-nilly.
Do we have to take a vote to reorder? Is that what that
Sounds
You're
like
says?
supposed to
Yes.
do that.
I don't know that the law requires that. That might be the league's.
The vote?
A vote to move the.
I've never seen agenda reviews come to a vote. Doesn't mean that they don't.
You could use
is
the
outside of agenda.
parliamentary procedure without any objections.
Doesn't
That's
make me
something
think any more than I have to.
It's like, unless no one objects, we're gonna do this. If someone objects, then you'd have to have a vote.
Okay.
I'm
So
fine with the vote.
we'll make that adjustment though
Yeah.
from a general agenda perspective. And I think from a deletion standpoint, that makes sense. I mean, reordering, voting on that, but. Well,
I'll check it I'll double check if it's in state law that you have to vote on
but
that.
deleting or adding something totally makes sense. I mean, because that's no different than, so, you know, me coming and be like, okay, we're gonna add these 6 items all of a sudden out of nowhere.
In the past, they've tabled without votes.
Okay. Good questions. Thought-provoking questions. Other comments, questions from council? Questions, comments from the public?
Can I just bring one other thing to your attention? Because we had when we were talking about these policies before, we had this question, and actually it may have been Councilor Corrigan who asked it. One of the significant changes in here from your other draft is the ability to communicate or to participate in meetings via electronic means of communication. And so this allows you to do that, but for one of you being present at the physical location.
I did notice that.
And any vote that's not unanimous has to be done by roll call.
And
Just want to draw your attention to it.
I know in the initial draft, we had a couple items too that crossed with the charter. It looks like they got fixed
Yeah.
too. You smoothed those out. A great job by Jesse too. I mean, we started editing document and there was more red than anything, and
Yeah.
finally just made the point of like, let's start over, and did a great job with that. So thank you.
Before
Yeah.
we close the discussion
Yeah.
too, I just wanted to say to thank you all for the discussion about that. It was definitely a really robust discussion, and I think that I definitely hear the concerns absolutely of where you're coming from, and my hope is that there'd be a way to accomplish the intent without infringing upon those concerns and creating those troublesome mechanics.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say thank you all so much, all of you, for that discussion.
No, I appreciate that. And that's, I think we'll go back and read through from the beginning, and sometimes the next day, an idea like that, suddenly you see, wait a second, here's where maybe the concept fits in somewhere. We'll think about that.
The only last little thing is the Article 12, liaison and commission assignments. I know we're still ironing out exactly how this works, as we're going to be voting members in commissions or not. Does that piece need to be in here, or does that live?
So we have a policy or a over governing charter on commissions. And that is actually what determines membership in the commissions. And if we wanted to add the voting members and define that, I think that would be the place to address that, not in the council policies and procedures. That's,
So with
I don't know, Jesse, if that makes sense from.
Yeah, so one of the things I tried to do with this article was make it general enough that it could apply to future commissions if they were realigned, or I purposely didn't name the commissions, but for the planning commission, which statutorily we're required to have. So I think this gives us enough flexibility if we do end up shifting duties and responsibilities of the commission, or arrangement or alignment or job or charges of the commissions. We're going to have to update the other policy, but I think this would all stay the same. I certainly haven't heard from anyone that we want to get away from liaisons around functional areas. So I see that as a little separate from the commission's process.
Yeah, I think his question gets to the idea that the participation level and format for counselors in different commissions is different. There are some counselors who actually are voting in those meetings, and there are some who are acting as true liaisons, i.e. I sit out there during the planning commission meetings, and then there are some who sit at the table, there are some who sit in the audience, and actually all four are operating differently. In terms of the ones that the counselors attend, having seen them in action. So I think that's I guess my answer to the question is I don't think it's addressed there, and that it needs to be addressed in that charter.
Perfectly fine. I just wasn't sure if
Yep.
it needed to be addressed here.
No, that's a good question.
As long as it's addressed somewhere.
Would that have to be a charter change then, that we have to go to the legislature?
No, there's a charter for commissions. Yeah, no. We have a chart. We have like a governing charter that says here's what the commissions are and what they do. So we should just go back and look at that and see where there is ambiguity, if it exists, and just make sure we're clear on that. That's on our to-do list.
Yeah, I know it's on the to-do list, and that's why I assumed it would be handled elsewhere, but I just want to make sure.
Yeah, that makes sense to not approve this if then we need to go back and revisit it to add it.
I check in with Jessie. She said she's still happy to be here and still having fun, even despite the to-do list.
Only been a month.
Yeah.
A month and 3 days.
Yeah.
Not that I'm counting.
Time flies when you're having fun. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Thanks for all your work on this. Really appreciate it. Great job. Okay. And with that, that concludes tonight's regular agenda. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So,
Motion by Nicole, second by Eric. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
aye.
And those opposed, motion carries. The meeting is adjourned.
Already got something from my peeps. I already got something from my new
Alright,
Commission
the first
friends.
one is the Promises Community
Everybody?
Grant. The cover sheet didn't get
Grant
to you
to,
last meeting to sign.
Okay.
Brian, Mahoney, Eileen's